Hello to BSc. We have already started with the adaptation of parasites, and as you can see in the previous lecture, we have already talked about the different adaptation in endoparasites. So in that morphological adaptation was and physiological adaptation was there, and this has been observed in helminths and protozoans. As we know, helminths and protozoans are basically most of the time endoparasites. Then we have also seen what kind of morphological adaptation has happened. So in that we have seen leads to loss or deterioration of body, lead to gain or new modification in the body, and the modification mode for reproduction. So in the previous lecture I have already covered the deterioration part, in which we have seen what kind of external changes that has happened within the endoparasite to adapt for the host environment. Second, we have seen the modification, means new things that has been developed within the body of parasite. The third one now we are talking about, that is the modification for reproduction. Now as in previous lecture I have told you that parasites don't go outside movement. If you talk about living organism, animals or microorganisms, the locomotion is required for reproduction as well as for the food gathering. So food gathering, they don't have to go anywhere because they are living with the food itself, and what is remaining is about the reproduction. So most of the organs and tissue in the helminths, is that of reproductive system. So they don't have special organs for digestion process, but they do have reproductive. The whole of the organ or whole of the body is a reproductive system. So as you can see, the nematodes have a large part of their body mass occupied by these organs and their product itself. There are some examples, as you can see, the T. saginata and Solium. Then you know the adult flatworm, which have few exceptions. They are hermaphrodites, or otherwise there is a distinctive male and female difference. Roundworms are dioecious, and in tapeworm, instead of single body unit, there are multiple segments of proglottids. Each one is sexually completed in itself. Okay, so whole of the we have seen the tapeworm diagram, as you can see here also. The diagram itself, the whole of the part is a proglottid and it is full of reproductive system. And to ensure the perpetuation of parasitic species, endoparasite produce a large number of eggs. So why it is so necessary to produce a large number of eggs? So remember, in these groups, cross fertilization, which was formerly the rule and is still possible, has been superseded by the self fertilization in many of the parasites. Adult flukes, tapeworms have a particularly complex reproductive system organs. So in tapeworm, what happens? Instead of a single body unit, there are multiple segments, proglottids. As you can see, each one is sexually complete in itself. A single proglottid has everything which is required for the reproduction. To ensure the perpetuation of the parasite species, endoparasites produce a large number of eggs. Important. In adult Ascaris, lumbricoids produce more than 200,000 eggs daily. The human hookworms, example, produces 25 to 30,000 eggs per day, and each gravid segment of tapeworm itself contains at least 30,000 or 50,000 eggs, and the gravid segment may produce up to 1,000 eggs. Now there are few more examples related with this. and they throughout the life they produce many eggs. Such an enormous amount of egg produced by endoparasites is to help to continue the race where the chances of survival are very remote. So just think about this, that one endoparasite, if human infestation occurs, then there is a possibility that within the human there will be development of 1, 2 or 3 parasites if we talk about helminths, especially if we talk about tapeworm or any other worms. There is a possibility that more number of worms may be present within one intestine, but suppose even though they are present, they will be present on the different locations. So not necessarily they will come in contact with each other. If they are in the same intestine, possibility is there they may come in contact with each other. Otherwise, there will be no contact with each other. So why to produce more number of eggs? Because destruction of this number of eggs is also possible. As through the fecal matter the eggs will go out, they will spread on the land. On the land they will degrade. They will be attacked by many predators or even the bacteria, and the chances that these eggs will get transferred into another human being is less. That's why number should be more. So at least out of 30,000 or 50,000, 10 or 5 eggs should get transferred within the humans. That's why this much number of egg production is required, and this particular adaptation has been observed in most of the endoparasites. So they have to go outside through the egg and they again enter into the body, and their egg development takes place and adult formation takes place. So this is how it works. So this is about the modification in reproduction. Now there is some unaltered system also. So everything changes for the adaptation? No. Some basic things remains as it is, such as this nervous and excretory system remain almost unchanged. Nervous system, whether endoparasites have nervous system, yes, they do have it, but not that much developed. Okay. Second thing is about the excretory system. Yes, if they are absorbing the food, definitely excreta formation will be there, and that excretory system is present. That doesn't change. But in some of the examples like flatworms, they have undergone some insignificant changes. Greatest modification among the helminths have been encountered in such forms that reside in the blood or lymph system. So there are many parasites which reside within our blood or lymph system. So what has happened with them? They have been reasonably designated as the old parasite, while those forms which live in the mouth or bladder of the host or on the body have been termed as the young parasite, as they demonstrated by the relatively slight modification of the prototype of their previous group. So what kind of modification they have? So there will be continuous flow of liquid, and they have to stay in that liquid. If you compare the adaptation of endoparasite which lives in intestine and adaptation of parasites which live in blood system, there is a slight change. Okay, so and some of them may not change that much. So this is all about the unaltered system. Okay, now we will go towards the another adaptation, that is called as a physiological adaptations. Now in physiological adaptations, what happens? Intracellular digestion. Now adult liver fluid. Now what is happening inside? This is important. You are absorbing the food, you are maintaining yourself in that environment. That is a different thing. Other than that, whatever you are absorbing, whether you are able to modify it or absorb, utilize it, produce the ATP from it. That is very important. So adult liver fluid, for example, hepatic absorption, bile, blood linked and other nutrients of the host, and digestion probably extracellular takes place in the intestinal ceca. Another thing, reserve food is mostly in the form of glycogen and fat. So they do have reserve food, and that will be in the form of glycogen and fat. So they can take up the glucose and other molecules through their body surfaces. So the species in which nutrients are absorbed through the body surfaces is regarded as an intracellular digestion. So cestodes, like any form of digestive canal, so they feed on the tissue elements and inflammatory exudates of the host. So all nutrients are absorbed across the tegument. So digestion is intracellular. Now, for example, lubricants, both extracellular and intracellular digestion has been reported. And when the cells of intestinal wall end up solid particles for digestion, it is called as intracellular digestion. So digestion is started extracellularly and takes place within the intestinal lining, but is completely intracellular. Okay, so remember, intracellular digestion is there. Okay, so this is one of the characteristics. Another part is about the osmoregulation. Now this is very important. If we talk about the cells, each cell, number of ions, for example sodium, potassium ions, those are maintained at some level, and we call it as a osmoregulation. Ions means which are having, for example, sodium was the concentration of sodium ions will be outside more in the cell, and inside potassium ions will be more. Then you have hydrogen ions also. Then you will have calcium ions also. So the maintenance of concentration of these ions should be maintained properly. So by the process of osmoregulation, the endoparasitic elements maintain relatively consistency of balance of salts, ions and water in their tissues. So what happens here, whatever concentration they have outside, similar kind of concentration they will be inside. So parasite maintains the same osmotic pressure as that of host. So it should have the similar kind of adaptation what host cells have. Okay, so there is no difficulty in maintaining the life. So this is one of the very important adaptation, osmoregulation. Without osmoregulation, life is not possible. If you can remember any of the experiment in which you keep the blood cells or RBCs in hypertonic solution, and hypotonic solution means increased concentration of salt, decreased concentration of salt. In that, what we have seen that when there is a saline water, the osmoregularity of the cell remains as it is, cell shape doesn't change. But if it is a hyper or hypo, then what happens, either it will burst, cell will burst, or cell will shrink. So what happens, ions move across the cell. So it is necessary to maintain the osmoregulation, otherwise life will not be possible. The third one, anaerobic respiration. Now, endoparasites live in an environment where there is more or lack of oxygen. Remember, endoparasite, so free oxygen is not available. So they have become adapted to the low metabolic rate, which require a minimum amount of oxygen. Very important. Their metabolism is very slow. It requires minimum amount of oxygen. Even they don't move. That's why they don't move, if they are present in one area, the locomotion requires energy. Less energy will be required. Less energy is required, less amount of oxygen will be required. So in this case, the respiration is anaerobic type, consisting of extracting oxygen from food which are absorbed in the tegument, and in absence of oxygen, energy released by the fermentation of glycogen. Glycolysis, if you can remember, in biochemistry, glycolysis. So fermentation of glycogen. In glycogen, what happens? Glycogen is the complex form of glucose. So number of glucose added form the complex chain. Okay, that we call it as a glycogen. So this glycogen will be converted to glucose first of all, and then the fermentation glucose 6-phosphate. Okay, so initially what happens, glycogen will be converted to glucose 1-phosphate, and from glucose 1-phosphate it will be converted to glucose 6-phosphate, and this glucose 6-phosphate will be broken down into in glycolysis and forms the pyruvate or pyruvic acid as the hydrogen acceptor from NAD and forms lactic acid, okay, and CO2. So this is also very much important part. So ATP synthesis inhibited by the fermentation of glycogen, very important. So at the end, about the adaptation in helminths, the group of parasitic helminths is over with respect to successive stages of adaptation which they have undergone and are undergoing continuously. So this process haven't finished. Their evolution is still going on, and one is able to appreciate the vastness and the performance of the principle of adaptations. So this was about the adaptation in helminths. Now talk about the adaptation in protozoans. Very important. They have a different type of adaptation as compared to helminths because protozoans are unicellular organisms, whereas helminths are multicellular organisms. Basically, protozoans present in blood. So parasitic protozoans live generally in constant environment. Okay, temperature fluctuation, if they are in blood, doesn't happen, very little. So very little or not at all inside the host. Desiccation is not there. They will not dry out. Desiccation is drying out, and food is in constant supply. No problem with the food because they are living in the food. So that is not the risk. So what happens here? There is one problem with the free living protist or free living protozoans. They have to face short or long term changes in the temperature, aquatic acidity, food supply, moisture, light, and so many other harsh conditions. Okay, so many protozoans respond to the adverse environmental condition by forming a protection layer that is called as encystin. Okay, they secrete a thick, tough wall around themselves and effectively enter a quiet state for some time. If there is a external harsh condition, means very dryness is there, at that time what will happen? They will be present inside the cyst. As you can see in the diagram, which is the ultrastructure of protozoan cyst. The protozoa is coming out of it, but the most of the major part, that is a cyst formation, and it protects them against the harsh environment. And whenever there is a water or good environment, they come out of the cyst. Cyst is not an egg, remember. Cyst is just a protective layer. So ability to form a resistant cyst is widespread among the diverse groups and probably developed early in the evolutionary history. So the cysts play an important role in the life cycle of several parasitic protozoans that have free living dispersal stage, such as Entamoeba, Histolytica, and Cristosporidium. So cysts are excreted in the host feces and survive in the water or the soil. So this is important. There are some resting cysts also. They are carried out by the wind in the form of, which is also one of the important means of dispersal of species that live in the soil, and they go towards the pond and the pools. If from dry area and in climates with distinct cold seasons, cysts will be an important phase in the annual life cycle. Okay, so humans basically are infected through the drinking or contaminated water, or eating raw fruits, vegetables which are not washed, where human feces are used as a fertilizer. Okay, so basically, why we wash all the vegetables? There is a possibility maybe human feces, fecal matter is present, or maybe these eggs are present on it within the soil, and if we don't wash it properly, possibility that these eggs should go inside. So it is necessary. So this is a kind of adaptation of protozoan we have. What about the protozoans which are present within the our body, or you can say parasite? So the most problematic part that may happen with this protozoan is our immune system. So protozoan parasite deceive the host immune defense, because most of their growth takes place inside the particular host cell. So protozoan parasite deceive them. When they are exposed to very severe condition at different stages of life cycle. One more thing is that our immune system always try to find those parasites which are having a similar kind of antigen present on their body. But these protozoans, what they do, they change continuously, or they take up the coat of the body layer itself. Means they will go inside some of the cells, infect some of the immune cells, or if they are present outside, they will change their life cycle continuously. So that is the reason why malaria is still there, and there is no vaccine for the malaria, because there are different stages which are present within the body, and immune system does not able to recognize them. That's why not able to destroy them. So one more thing, adaptation to comparatively subcellular features also. So as I have told you that they may enter into the, they protect themselves against some of the phagocytic cells, okay, the lysosome secretion which happens, but they protect themselves against it and survive within the cells, white blood cells for example, and grow there. Okay, so protozoan were exposed to very severe conditions at different stages. So it has adapted comparatively some subcellular features that are membrane and organelles, which also helps them to withstand these severe conditions. So most of the organisms are microscopic in nature, whereas few of them grow which will be visible to our naked eyes. Few of them are there. In protozoans like eukaryotes display all the features that are similar to the higher metazoa. So hence cyst formation is also there, and subcellular features are the parasitic adaptation of protozoa. So these are all the features of adaptation of endoparasites within our body. In next lecture we will talk about the ectoparasites and their adaptations, again morphological and physiological adaptations. Thank you.